couldn't they think of a less painful way to kill people?
At the time, they thought they were good about it, you know.
Tell us what you know about this.
Well,
William Jobling, the last man to be executed in Britain.
well, I believe he had been arrested for strangulation, and he had been fingered, and I believe he was hung, drawn and quartered. The local people got his body and brought it here and given him a proper burial because they were just leaving it to rot on the side of the river. Now the other men who had been arrested, they got deported to Australia.
So such painful means of execution was common at the time, was it? Or was it reserved for minors?
I think it was common in one respect, but if you happen to be a minor, they didn't care what they did to you, you know.
And welcome to this, the 8th annual commemoration of the Seven Lads of Jarrow and Rebeltown Festival. In a few moments' time, Tony Wilson's going to sing a song remembering the Seven Lads of Jarrow, after which time we'd be very grateful if you could move over to the memorial stone, the stone that marks where the pub The Gaslight used to be, and by popular belief, the final resting place of Jobling, who was hung and gibbeted in Jarrow Slack. His barrows rescued him and repatriated his body to the Gaslight, as we popularly believe. And we'll do a wreath laying across by the stone after Tony has performed the fantastic song commemorating the Seven Lads. Thank you.
I never used to be political until I found out about the Seven Lads of Jarrow. And as I travel around the country singing this song, the number of times there's similar things that happened in the past. People like Lord Londonderry can all have a communal spit when I say his name. You ready? After 1, 2, 3, Lord Londonderry. All these people who sort of took advantage of the working men. Anyway, this is about the Seven Lads of Jarrow. Shake your chains to earth like the dew that in your sleep have fallen on you. Ye are many, and they are still so few. The company owns what the company cares. Do as we say, or you'll feel the whip. The miners asked a decent wage for a decent day. Not Tommy checks and poverty, as coal baron slaves. They quoted from the Bible, but the prophets were their own. They owned your life, your breath, your home. The miners used reason that came from the heart. With black legs and yeomen, the owners made them mark. And look to the heavens, bring their tale to mind. We all know their names, sing each one with pride. Johnson, Barker, Eccleston and Armstrong, Smith, Stewart, Stevenson, it's your song. And look to the heavens, bring their tale to mind. We all know their names, sing each one with pride. You know their names lie deep inside my heart. Jarrow's the place where a story starts. Seven lads of Jarrow, pitmen on strike. Reynard's lackeys up for the fight, afraid the pitmen would win the day. Transported the lads a lifetime away. Hepburn's Union fought tooth and nail. The lads never dreamt they'd end up in jail. And look to the heavens, bring their tale to mind. We all know their names, sing each one with pride. Johnson, Barker, Eccleston and Armstrong, Smith, Stewart, Stevenson, it's your song. And look to the heavens, bring their tale to mind. We all know their names, sing each one with pride. The magistrate was of the ruling mass. There's still no justice for us, the second class. gave the hardest sentence a man could earn. To Australia, never to return. It's not just a story, something from our past. It's our history, we're hearing it at last. Learn their names, sing out loud. All learn their names, it's a chance to be proud. And shake your chains to earth like the dew that in your sleep have fallen on you. Ye are many, and they are still so few. Never returned to the pens and the wives, served out the time and made new lives. The greatest sin was to be Union men. In Jarrow, never seen again. Can you see them serving out their time? Mara's all alone in a disused mine. Learn their names and never forget. 7 lads at Jarrow, sing your respect. And look to the heavens, bring their tale to mind. We all know their names, sing each one with pride. Johnson, Barker, Eccleston and Armstrong, Smith, Stewart, Stevenson, so strong. And look to the heavens, bring their tale to mind. Learn their names, sing each one with pride.
Thank you so much, Tony. And now if people would like to join us over by the memorial stone, we will lay the wreaths and then we'll proceed up the path towards Meet the Band to the site of the colliery where we will pause and remember miners who lost their lives working in our coal industry. Thank you. Make our way onto the path. I'll just put it in. We pause here to mark the site of Jarrow's last colliery, and I'm not going to tell you all about it because we've got the fantastic Abby who's going to come and do that.
The Jarrow colliery's history stretches back to the 1600s. 42 shafts existed, mostly near Jarrow Hall. The metal seam, outcrops along the river and near the museum, was only 100 feet beneath the surface. Coal was mined in the area since 1066, with work being passed from father to son, and the community of mining families grew. The colliery here began its life in 1803, with the deep shaft close to this spot, mining some of the most magnificent coal in Britain, from the 6-feet-high Benjamin steam 1,000 feet below our feet. Sadly, the pit was flooded following the failure of a pump at Freya's Goose near Gateshead. The pit was finally abandoned in 1852, but work continued in Hebburn not far away. The last colliery along the Tyne coast was Westrow in 1994, ending centuries of coal production on the river. These years of coal were not without much sadness. This colliery here was known by the locals as the Slaughter Pit. In 1827, 6 miners were killed by an explosion. In 1826, 1828, and 1845, there were further explosions. Between 1813 and 1845, 162 miners were killed in the coal mine beneath where we stand now. We know in particular those children who died here. George Atkinson, aged 11, Robert Baird, 12, John Bell, 9, James Doxford, 12, John Lawton, 9, Richard Marshall, 12, Norman Roberts, 9, Isaac Scott, 10, William Smith, 12, Richard Story, 9, William Tate, 9, John Wills, 9. The band will now play the Miners' Hymn tune written by a miner from Hebburn in memory of these young lads and of all the people killed here and in mines around the world.
Thank you so much to the Felling Silver Band for that beautiful rendition of Gresford. We will meet outside the Crown and Anchor for a final performance from the band and then the rest of the day's entertainment. Thank you very much, everybody.
Cathy Vogan for Consortium News, and I'm with
Tony Wilson.
Tony Wilson, who wrote that beautiful song.
That's right. Well, I wrote the tune and one of the verses, so I knew nothing about it until a friend of mine mentioned it about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's really politicised me, to be honest.
Yeah. But when did you actually write the song?
2 years ago.
Only 2 years ago?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness, it just sounds so much like it comes from back then, right?
That is such a great compliment, to be perfectly honest. I mean, that's what I strive to do,
yes.
to try and write in the traditional style.
In the style.
In that kind of style.
Yeah.
But, yes, he mentioned it to me. I think it was about January of 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I didn't do anything about it. And then he said, well, there's a festival coming up. So
yeah.
can you learn it? Can you write it? So I wrote an extra verse, wrote the tune for it. And then I'd finished it. And then about 3 days later, I had to perform it. And Jeremy Corbyn was the guest speaker that time. So that was kind of what I tend to call a bowel loosening experience to get it right.
Yeah.
But I sang it last year as well and this year. But I travel around the country and I hear about all kinds of different industrial disputes that happened in the 19th century.
Yes.
Not a good time to be in a union or all of those kind of things.
Well, I think it was very ugly. I mean, there were people being taken to Australia for
yes.
all kinds of trivial reasons and
yes.
treated appallingly. Even
yes.
the Aboriginals were
yes.
shocked at the cruelty.
Yeah.
Of these.
And some of the things that happened in Tasmania and and things like this, you know.
Well, the Tasmanian Aboriginal is extinct.
Yes.
They wiped them out.
I know. There's lots of things that we've got to be fearful and sorry for.
But it was brutal 40 years ago as well.
Oh, to be perfectly honest, it's pretty brutal here now. I mean, the Seven Lads of Jarrow is 190 years old, and there's similar aspects to the union work now. You know, that they're trying to crush the unions yet again. So.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
They do it economically now, don't they?
That's right.
There's no truncheons these days.
There's lots of injustices
yes.
that are going on that we don't even vaguely know about.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Well, once again, thank you. You sang that song so beautifully today.
I should imagine I'll be singing it just again this time. So.
Yes, that's
well, thank
right.
you. Thank you so much indeed for this.
Welcome to the Crown and Anchor.
Thank you,
welcome
Tony.
to the Rebel Town Band, who led us so well on the march. Played Gresford so beautifully at the side of the pit and have entertained us for the last few minutes here. Thank you very much, Failing Silver Band. Thank you. We're very lucky to have Kate Osborne, who has taken time out of what I'm sure we can all agree is a very busy schedule. Kate has been an absolute stalwart supporter of this event since she was first elected as MP for Jarrow. So I am delighted to introduce Kate Osborne, who will come and say a few words to you this morning.
Good morning, everybody, and what a beautiful morning it is, and it's lovely to see so many people here. Brilliant to be here at the 8th Rebel Festival and to celebrate the significant role our wonderful town of Jarrow has played in the history of Britain's industrial relations over the past 200 years. As Vin said, it isn't the first time I've spoken here. I think this is the 4th time. But the first time now as a Labour Party candidate in the middle of a general election. So I hope you'll forgive me if I'm unable to stay for the entire event. And it's not just the general election that makes this year significant. Of course, this year is the 40th anniversary of the miners' strike. And I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing what Arthur has to say later on. I hope you all like my Pits and Perverts, Lesbians and Gays Support the Miners t-shirt. LGSM supported the NUM during 84-85 and raised thousands of pounds for miners and their families. And this week marks the 40th anniversary of the Battle of Orgreave. A moment I will never forget, particularly because it happened on my 18th birthday, so I'm giving my age away now. 40 years since those striking miners at Orgreave were attacked by the police, leading to one of the most violent clashes in British industrial history, where many were injured. And 40 years on, and yet still no one has been held accountable. So I'm really pleased that this week Labour recommitted to a public inquiry to ensure that the truth about the events of Orgreave come to light. Jarrow has a long, proud history of standing up for workers' rights and for better living standards for our community. The crusade rightly reminds us all, and it remains one of the most celebrated workers' events of the 1930s. It instilled a great strength of community spirit and togetherness that I think we still feel today at events like this. And the Jarrow Crusaders deserve our respect and our gratitude. They were on the right side of history, but in their honour we should also keep demanding more for the North East. I was proud to be the first female MP elected for Jarrow since Red Ellen, and I'm honoured to be the candidate for the newly named Jarrow and Gateshead East constituency. In Ellen's first speech in Parliament, she said, "The years go on and nothing is done. This is a desperately urgent matter." Well, the same could be said for the last 14 years of Tory rule. Years of more neglect of the North East, our communities, years of child and pensioner poverty, rising numbers in Jarrow and Gateshead East. 14 long years of consecutive Conservative governments that have destroyed so much that in 21st century Britain our water is no longer safe to drink. And on the day that the general election was called, I asked the Prime Minister's question on the amount of sewage that they've dumped in our waterways and the amount of shit that now comes out of our taps. In his usual way of attempting to gaslight people, Sunak responded saying everything was going well and people here are pleased with how the Tories are governing. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm not pleased. I don't think anyone here is pleased. No one here thinks that the last 14 years has improved our lives. And on the 4th of July, we have the chance to let them know exactly what we think and to kick them out. Woo! Because what we've seen is local authority budgets destroyed, crisis in housing, social care and education, the systematic, deliberate destruction of our NHS, chopping it up, giving it to private companies and letting NHS workers' pay stagnate, leading to a record high 7.5 million people now on waiting lists. 14 years of Tory chaos, corruption and incompetence. Tories sleepwalking from one disaster to the next and crashing our economy. In Jarrow and Gateshead East, 31% of our children are living in poverty. Homelessness is at its highest. Rents and mortgage costs soaring, energy bills through the roof, and instead of levelling up, all we got was more broken promises, more lies and more neglect of our northern communities. Ellen's book, The Town That Was Murdered, helped the drive for a welfare state, and the Labour government of 1945 that created the NHS. And what we need now is a Labour government that will rebuild Britain, that will eradicate child poverty, and that will fix our NHS and our crumbling schools, and that will provide for pensioners and look after our communities from the cradle to the grave. I'm not here to pretend that Labour's manifesto is everything I or you have ever dreamed of, or that the last 14 years of destruction can be changed overnight. But what I am here to say is that we should allow ourselves to see the absolute concrete promises that will make the lives of millions better. From the commitment to restoring miners' pensions that will mean some people here in Jarrow and Gateshead East finally get their pension, to the still brilliant New Deal for workers that will come in within the first 100 days. Changing the world of work for the better and improving workers' rights, to abolishing the age brackets in the minimum wage. And it's absolutely right that people get paid the rate for the job that they're doing and it's about time that this age discrimination was abolished. As a lifelong trade unionist, campaigning for workers to have better pay and conditions, I'm proud to have stood on so many picket lines in these last few months. Far too many to mention, and despite some significant pushback from residents who just want their bins collected, and a council that seems hell-bent on attacking their workers, I will keep speaking up for the GMB workers in dispute right now, and who are taking 3 weeks more strike action from the 2nd of July. Because yes, even though that's over polling day, they have my full support. Workers have rights for a reason. Threatening letters and suspending trade union reps should not be tolerated. As a Jarrow rebel, I'll always stand up for residents and workers and for our NHS. And I'm so pleased that in the spirit of solidarity, I've been endorsed by 6 trade unions, by Unite, the CWU, GMB, FBU, RMT and ASLEF, and by the Socialist Health Association, and the SHA are here today to show their support of our Rebel Festival, so thank you to them. Before Parliament was dissolved, I stood up in Parliament against the Tories' authoritarian agenda and their attempts to turn the clock back on the rights of the vast majority of people in this country. Workers, women trade unionists and LGBTQ+ people. And I spoke out against the slaughter in Palestine, calling for a full ceasefire from the moment that the bombing started. I've been supported by PSC and Labour Friends of Palestine, and just today have endorsed the 5 commitments to continue to call for a ceasefire and release of the hostages, full restoration of the UNRWA funding and an immediate injection of aid, an end to arms sales being used against civilians, implementation of the ICJ and ICC rulings, urgent restoration of healthcare facilities and medical aid. And I'm pleased that Labour's manifesto includes a commitment to recognise the state of Palestine. But of course, so much more needs to be done immediately to stop the horrific scenes that we are seeing and the already huge death toll. I will keep supporting all those who are fighting back. As I hope you know, I was at the forefront of the campaign to deliver justice for sub-postmasters impacted by the Post Office Horizon scandal, and it was the petition from Bolton resident Chris Head in the PMQ that I asked Boris Johnson in my first 3 months, where he committed to an independent inquiry, which is how we've managed to expose all the corruption that we've seen evidenced in the last year. And I'll keep fighting for justice and compensation for the WASPI women and for others. And of course, I know you would expect nothing less from a Jarrow rebel. The spirit of the Jarrow Crusade lives in us all here. I want to end by thanking the organisers of the Great Rebel Festival, Davy Douglas.
Thank you, Kate. And I am very privileged to invite Davy to come and join us, who is going to speak on some of the history of the events that we've been commemorating these last few years.
We commemorate 199 years. Next year is the bicentenary of the founding of the United Colliers of Durham and Northumberland in 1825. It's 200 years it'll be of class struggle in the region, on the river, and in Jarrow in particular. A lot of the dynamic events took place in Jarrow. Of course, the transportation of the 7 men, it was originally 9, and originally they were sentenced to death, but the 7 of them sent to Australia. Also the assassination of the magistrate, probably in retaliation for the deportation. Nobody will tell me that these 2 men who killed him were just be standing and he rode by, especially when one of them was the brother of one of the men who was deported. The hanging and gibbeting of Joplin, the murder of a union overman crossing Wall's End by Secapassac Police. The armed resistance of Felon and Gateshead miners, and the heroic Mrs. Carr, who sparked the whole riot with the shout of "The Union forever." The spirit of resistance throughout the Northern Coalfield, then later the Northern Liberator, physical force Chartism, and the Northern Insurgency. Coal was and is a dynamic, enduring industry. 1 million answer miners, the biggest single miners' strike in the history of the world, or the biggest single strike in the history of the world. In 1912, nearly 1.25 million miners and the Miners' Federation went on strike for a national minimum wage. In 26, the country's only general strike, seen the miners in the lead, and of course the TUC lasted 9 days before they sold it out and left us to 9 starvation-filled months. My dad, my granddad, included. During which time Churchill, the national hero, he put machine guns at the pit heads in 21, and the tanks on the streets and armoured cars on the docks in 26, and he swore he'd drive us back down our holes like rats. And when Arthur Cook swore that we'd let the grass grow in the pulley wheels before we submit to longer hours and lower wages, Churchill said, "You will eat it." We have never forgot those words. The much maligned and yet eternally memorable Jarrow March. In 72, the biggest single enterprise in Europe, the NCB, won a strike for a wages increase. We were 14th from the bottom of the whole country. And Ted Heath, of course, in 74, asked the country, who rules, the government or the unions? And the reply, we'll let you anyway. The women of the mine communities, as much a race as the miners, a fixed group throughout history, dwelling in unique equations, following mothers and grandmothers for countless generations, the wives as comrades and companions of the miners, for 300 plus years, who stood through the strikes, evictions and murders, organised the football matches in 21 and 26 in soup kitchens, organised rent strikes for council houses and pit houses in the 70s, organised the women of the coalfields in 73 to 74, and the monumental Women Against Pit Closures, who organised pickets, flying pickets, organised holiday trips and morale boosting socials in 84, 85. And then we started this Eastern Justice. We started a breakthrough, and miners again were the top of the wages league. And miners were seen on a holiday in Tenerife, LA, Bulgaria, and not just Cleethorpes and Skeggy and Whitley Bay. It's normally the drink that does this to me. From 81 until 93, we fought Thatcher and the manoeuvrings for the industry, a vital and strategic industry then and now. We found ourselves in war for survival, 10 years of war with the Tories, and 13 years of war of apathy and ignorance from Blair. But I wonder how many in this crowd and how many in the union movement would support us if the strike was happening now. We didn't, as some leaders say, as somebody has said, British steel workers, The job losses are necessary, but it's too soon. Wait for 10 years and then they can blow up the blast furnaces. What nonsense. The world needs primary steel. Britain is the only capitalist country to have no steel making facilities. And whether now or in 10 years' time is absurd. It's electric arc. I don't know. They keep referring to it. I think they think it's something to do with Noah or the Bible or something like that. The electric arc employs 200 people, not 2,000 people like in Fort Talbot. Nor does it have 10,000 related jobs. In any case, you can't make new steel. You can't make capital steel with an electric arc. And the justification, Tata Steel made £1 billion loss. And Scunthorpe made a similar loss. Because British steel was the dearest in the world. Not because it cost more to produce it, but because the government put a crippling 2/3 carbon tax on it. No other country does that. That's the truth. The carbon tax killed British steel and British industry and everything made from it. Yet, steel workers say that they support decarbonisation. Well, why not? With the decarbonisation, we can do that. You can fit carbon capture and storage fitted to the blast furnaces. It means that the 2% of the 1% Britain produces for the world can be captured and stored. But they don't mean that. They mean decarbonisation, and that means no primary steel, which is the stuff that counts. My short-sighted, non-industrial comrades now say the loss of British steel means you have no need for the new mine in Cumberland. Let me explain again. If we have to import steel from Europe, as you will do when you have no steel making facilities, they will be using coke. They use coke made from coal, and they'll want to buy that coal from somewhere. Britain, most of the steel-making countries in Europe, stupidly, do not mine their own coke and coal, so they have to buy it on the international market. Ours is better. It will be a fixed employer, have a fixed supplier rather, and also a fixed price for the coal, as opposed to the fluctuating price on the international spot market. Also, it's 2% less carbon intensive for the simple reason we are closer than Appalachia in supplying it. It's also 18% less carbon intensive due to the mine itself being carbon neutral in its operations. No, we know coal is not carbon neutral. We are referring to the actual operation of the mining. So we can export coal to Europe, and they because we can burn it here, we have to be net zero. We will send it to them, and they will turn it into coke, and then into steel, and then ship it back here. What's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that. We should be making the bloody steel ourselves. They have an expression in Yorkshire, it's like pissing in bed awake. In '84, we foretold that time the destruction of steel, the destruction of coal was a prelude to the destruction of steel, which is the prelude to closing manufacturing per se. You can't have renewables, any renewables, without coal. Offshore coal means coal mines. Offshore wind means coal mines, either here or anywhere else, but you need them because coal makes steel, which makes wind turbines. And in case you didn't notice it, it also needs cement. Cement is made using coal. So, what is the prelude to the closure of coal and steel and in manufacturing is now the prelude to gas. 200,000 direct jobs $750,000 knock-on doors, jobs. But here's the rub. The steel, coal and oil and gas we still use. We just won't produce it. We won't need to tremble at the sound of the proletariat marching, because there won't be any. Thatcher's vision, shared by the three major parties, not least Kit Zava, including the PLP, wished to get rid of the British proletariat. Coal, steel, oil, cement, gas manufacture, the producers of things, they aim to wipe us out. And yes, we told you so, but that doesn't help. Your leaders are not listening. As Ralph Baxell said, they're not listening still. I'm sorry if that offends all the good, sincere and loyal members of the Labour Party, but that's my conclusion. Starmer is on a titanic collision course with what's left of the workers' industrial movement. A collision course with power and fuel and the economy and modern life, and possibly Russia and China as they go on playing the war games. But that is to come. Do our industrial unions, who still have their finger on the jugular of industry, die without a whimper, or do they fight as hard as those generations did for 200 years? It's time to ask again, as did the miners of Harland County, what side are you on? Thank you.
Thanks for those brilliant words, and very well done. Davey shares a really important message. We can't, in this country, talk about our green agenda and carbon reduction simply by offshoring that pollution to other parts of the developing world. We need a truly internationalist view of energy, of production, and of course, as trade unionists, we believe in internationalism in all of its manifestations. So an important and significant internationalist message this afternoon. The next speaker is a member of my own union. She's the Vice President-elect for the National Education Union. She's Sarah, and I can see she's frantically trying to, she's found somebody else to hold the Northumberland banner and making her way to the front now. An absolute ardent campaigner for social justice in all of its guises, and has been a strong supporter of events like this right across the region, and I'm delighted that she's able to come and speak to us today.
Thank you very much, Vin, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. I really am honoured by the invitation. For 13 years I worked as an art teacher in a secondary school not 10 minutes from here. When I started there in 2009, it was one of the best equipped schools in the region for art, drama and music. Its reputation was excellent. Serving a community which was suffering from severe deprivation, it managed to achieve far beyond expectations. This was through a combination of adequate funding, consistent staffing and ambition for our pupils. We believed that the children who attended our school were as capable, as worthy, as valuable as any other child. In 2010 we had a change of government, and with them a change of direction in education. Funding for schools was decimated, changes to the curriculum and assessment sidelined and marginalised the arts, and every vocational qualification that we once offered were removed as we could no longer count them in the data. This was the beginning of a steep decline in our school, accelerated rapidly by the imposition of a forced academy order in 2017. Within a couple of years we'd lost our head teacher, the heads of all major departments, almost every experienced member of staff, and our sixth form. I was the union rep and I stuck it out longer than most, but at huge personal cost. I eventually left in 2022 and I felt utterly defeated by the endless battles I'd had to wage. But the story of this school isn't unusual. This fight has played out in schools up and down the country since 2010, and it's nothing less than the fight for state education itself. State education was fought for and won by giants of our movement, giants like the Jarrow MP Ellen Wilkinson, who believed that the working class deserved more and who fought to make it a reality. but we're a long way from the visionary Labour Party of the 1940s. We're a long way even from Blair's Labour Party of the 1990s, who fed me and clothed me and paid me to stay at school, who made me believe that I had something to offer and a hell of a lot to pay back, who made me believe that I could be a teacher and that I had a contribution to make. Barring some exceptional MPs who have somehow escaped the axe, there's little to no hope in what Starmer's Labour Party have to offer. But it's a lesson learned by generations before us that our freedom, prosperity and security is not in the gift of government. It's something we have to organise for. It's something we have to fight for. It's something we have to win. My optimism does not lie with politicians. It's with the working class. It's with the trade unions. It's with the movement for a better world. We know it won't be handed to us, and right now it feels more out of reach than I have ever known. But we know it's in our power to demand it. It's in our power to create it. Under a Tory government or under Labour, if we want change, we need to demand it. In the last 2 years, we've seen the beginnings of a resurgence in the trade union movement. We've seen groups of workers walk out and call on the government for change, and what's most heartening of all is that they've done so with mass public support. My own union, the NEU, held 8 days of strike action to secure better pay and funding. When the government tried to lure us back with an unfunded pay offer, our members rejected it out of hand. What good is a pay rise to us if our school buildings are crumbling around us and our pupils don't have the resources they need to learn? We stood shoulder to shoulder with our communities and we demanded better. That fight will no doubt continue into the next Parliament, but our action galvanised a whole new generation of activists. It's an honour to stand alongside the giants of the movement today. I hope we can learn from them, go forward with a sense of renewed optimism, and that change is in our hands. The past we inherit, the future we build.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think a really important message, the message of the Durham Miners Gala, the message of today, that we inherit the past, but we build and fight for a fairer future. Hugely significant that we recognise where we came from in understanding where we need to go next. And where we're going next this afternoon is our final speaker, and a man who needs absolutely no introduction from me, however, I'm about to try one. Genuinely, an absolute honour to introduce Arthur, the leader of the National Union of Mine Workers, a hero of mine since the early 80s, and particularly leading the strike 40 years ago, the anniversary of which we're commemorating today, along with those other events in Tyneside. So without any further ado, a big hand please, and welcome Arthur to the rostrum, please.
It's a privilege to be here today. 40 years since we took the momentous decision to take strike action in the fight for jobs and in the fight to save our pits, but more than that, to save our communities. I'm here today not just to say what we did and didn't do, well, that's important, but I'm here to say that the people who took part and the people who supported us fought the greatest workers' fight since the days of the Merthyr Rising in 1831, the Tolpuddle Martyrs in 1834, the Newport Chartists in 1839, and the Featherstone Martyrs in 1893, and of course the suffragettes for equal rights to vote in 1903. I honour, as always do, the young miners who were fighting for the future. I was told when I spoke in Sheffield in 1984 that young miners would never emulate their fathers. I said that the young people today will be as bad, as good as any that went before them. And the magnificent women against pit closures. It was absolutely terrific. I will never forget that amazing day on the 12th of May, 1984, when 12,000 women from all over the coalfields came together in Barnsley. Some of those women had never been out of the village in which they were born. They came together to stage a historic march. We actually planned that they would have in the region of 250 people. When I turned up at that meeting, I couldn't believe my eyes. You know, 10,000 people to any demonstration. But for women, and they only allowed 2 people who were male to speak. The leader of the Yorkshire Miners and myself. We held this rally, and as we walked through the town, the police said, "You can't go down that road." Why? They said. They said, "Because it's been planned, and that's the way you go." They said, "Well, we got notice for you, we're going that way." He had a bit of common sense. They went that way, through the town centre. Everybody saw them, television, radio, newspapers. When we got to the public hall, nearly 4,000 were packed in, and a similar number outside with loudspeaking facilities. Before the start of that meeting, they were approached by the fire brigade and the police. Did they realise that they were breaking the law? There were too many people in the public hall. It was limited to 2,300. And I said to them, if you feel empowered to go to those women and tell them they can't stay here, they've got to go out, good luck, try it. He took one look at this massive crowd, and he had a bit of intelligence, one of the few. He said, "I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm ordering you to vacate this hall by 6 o'clock tonight." It was 12 o'clock. I said, "We'll accept that." And from that meeting, those women didn't just form soup kitchens, they formed picket lines. They were there on demonstration all over Britain. They were a credit to their fathers and mothers and to their grandfathers and grandmothers. It's appropriate that I am here today, and of course there's David here, a hero in that strike. He's suffering, as the people could see, but his words resonate with me and everybody else as we fought the greatest battle, in my opinion, of the 20th or 21st century, take it which will. It's been celebrated all over Britain. I've spoken at 5 rallies. In some of them there's been over 1,500 packed in. At the Hatfield pit where David worked, it was packed. So they understand what we were fighting for. I'm fed up, by the way, of critics saying we picked the wrong time for a strike. The strike and the dispute didn't start on the 19th of April 1984. It started in the previous October, when the delegate conference agreed unanimously, and if there's somebody from the Sun here, that means all of them, that we would impose an overtime ban. a full one. Even people from Nottingham voted for it. By March 1984, I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that the stocks of coal at power stations had no longer to live than 6 months. As David has said, absolutely correctly, the real targets, as I announced at that time, in the first instance, of course, unfortunately, the NEC didn't accept my recommendation. I said that the weakest point for them is not the power stations, not the people in Nottingham who haven't come out. I said it's the British Steel Corporation and the coking plants. They are really the targets. On the basis that I had the information, I knew, I didn't think, I knew that the steel plants at Scunthorpe in Lincolnshire, Ravenscraig in Scotland, and Port Talbot and Llanwern in South Wales were supplied with coking coal. I also knew that these had a limited life. I said that no more than 3 weeks. My view was supported from an unlikely source. We had trade union leaders who were leading unions against us, sabotaging our fight, who wouldn't come out on strike for us. We struck and we went into Sheffield in 1980 and picketed out all the workers at that Hatfield plant. And Bill Sears, the leader of the Steelworkers Union, within 2 hours had instructed them to go back to work. What a sabotage of working class leadership. We knew, of course, that the issues at stake were important. On the 18th of June 1984 took the Battle of Orgreave. How did we know? Well, the councillor in charge of the police, because the authority at that time, showed me the letter sent from the government, top secret. There were no question about this, 8,200 police in riot gear were at Orgreave. We had 10,000 pickets at Orgreave. People tell me we shouldn't have gone because they knew we were coming and go en masse. Well, of course they knew we were coming. The battle at Orgreave started on the 22nd of March of May. I was there, and in May 23rd there was a demonstration where real violence was shown. On the 24th it was the same, and on the 30th of May I was arrested along with a lot more. So they knew we were going to come en masse, as we did on the 18th of June. We planned it. As David Douglas knows, we called a number of people in, and I'd purchased from a second-hand shop in Sheffield walkie-talkies, out of date, certainly not anywhere near the police and communications. We had one advantage: they didn't understand it. David Douglas was one of those whom I gave a walkie-talkie to. Jack Taylor was another. And what many people don't know, we had a film crew. 2 members of our staff were filming that event. Now, I was told by a barrister, if you show the film, it may well be that you'll be charged with conspiracy to bring down the government. I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. But anyway, eventually, they charged 93 of our members with riot. People saw on television what violence really was, and it was from the police. And in speech after speech all over Britain, I've drawn attention to the fact that the truth should come out, and it will, I promise you that. First of all, the scenes from Orgreave were deliberately misrepresented by the BBC. They deliberately reversed a film to show that it was pickets who were charging, when we knew that it was the police on horses that were charging the pickets. That came out in the hearing in the High Court. But of course, we had one police officer who said, I can give my evidence. I was carrying a long shield. He said that my colleague, another police officer, had also got a long shield. He said that a picket threw a brick and it hit his shield and it bounced under my long shield and caused a serious injury. During the lunch break, one of our barristers from Wales had a little look outside because I examined the area. When we got back in court, he said, I want to say, I've been testing the brick. Do you know something? He said, it doesn't bounce. He said, we got a whole brick, didn't bounce. But anyway, we thought, we'll try it with a half a brick. It didn't bounce. Case dismissed. Next witness. I apprehended this man for a violent conduct at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Michael Mansfield, the QC, said, are you sure? Could have been 8:10? No. Could have been just before 8? No. He says, could you then explain to the court at 8 a.m. in your notebook you were giving no evidence. He said you were actually having a breakfast in Rotherham Police Station. How could you do it? Case dismissed. And of course, at one point, this is a very important point, we closed the plant at Orgreave. Now, not many people say it, but it's true. On the 18th of June 1984, when all the violence was seen, and it came from the police, many of them, in my view, seconded from the armed forces. Not the first time that would happen. It happened at Featherstone, when 2 lads were shot and killed. So it wasn't the first time that they had spoken about violence. But a telex was sent by Haslam, the chairman of British Steel, to close the plant because he was horrified at the violence that was taking place from the police. A copy of that telex was received by the BBC correspondent Nicholas Jones, and he handed a copy of that to me. And luckily, it's in Dave Douglas's book, The Ghost Dancers, that the plant was actually closed. I couldn't do anything more because I was in hospital having been knocked unconscious on the 18th of June. And from my hospital bed, and we've got photographic evidence of it, and there's film of it, I phoned all the area leaders who were on strike, and I pleaded with them to increase the number of pickets, not in any way decrease them. I'll never forget the fact that for some unknown reason they pulled off the pickets, and I'm convinced that had they continued they would have succeeded not only in closing that plant but closing the Scunthorpe plant, the steel plant itself, which had only got 3 weeks supply. 3 weeks supply, and had it gone down, what would happen? Well, it would be disastrous for the government. I've got a witness, in the sense that Margaret Thatcher wrote her autobiography, and it's in there that they were in a fix. The chairman of the CEGB, the Electricity Authority, made clear that the stocks of coal were not what had been said. There were only 6 months supply. Now, my maths are bad, but 6 months from March to September, and the steel industry would have been down, and the government would have been out. But no, Bill Sears sabotaged it by refusing to give us any support whatsoever. And that, together with other people who ought to have known from a class point of view better, could have saved not only our jobs, but the jobs of you in the movement now. And that's the reason they're able to pick off. And even today, by the way, I listened carefully to what people like Dave said about the import of fuels. Would it surprise you to know that the electricity that we get is fueled by coal? They still import it. They do it in a funny way. They get a third party to buy it from Russia, and then they sell it to Britain. Instead of digging their own coal, by the way, it can be done with no emissions of CO2. It was a load of nonsense. We had a plant in embryo at the Point of Air colliery in North Wales which demonstrated liquefaction. We could turn the coal at the mine into liquid, and from that liquid we could extract petrol, diesel, oil, gas, and all the petrochemicals that you can think of. That's how near we came. But for the decision that was to take place in the October. In October, the Deputies' Union decided to come on strike with us. They had a ballot. 82% voted to come on strike. And we were called to the conciliation scheme, ACAS. We were put in different rooms. The coal board in one room, the NUM in one room, and the Deputies' Union in a third. We were getting nowhere with them by passing messages. And so I drew up, with the consent of the colleagues I had there, Peter Heathfield and Mick McGahey, these words on a paper. I drew it up in a hope that they were accepted. Quotes, that the National Coal Board withdraw its pit closure plan, give an undertaking that the 5 collieries earmarked for immediate closure be kept open, and guarantee that no pit will be closed unless by joint agreement it was deemed to be exhausted or unsafe, unquote. I then took that piece of paper to the deputy's room. Peter McNestry and Sampy, their president, read it and agreed with it. They agreed with it. And they told their members that agreed with it. We came downstairs together, and so we were in one room together. We called in ACAS. ACAS said, we can accept that. We knew, and Thatcher knew. It's in her autobiography. She said, if the deputies had gone on strike, we were in a real fix, and we would have no alternative but to settle on the terms agreed at ACAS. Now that meant total victory. So what happened? The coal board walked out, but it didn't matter. We were coming out on strike, the deputies. 2 days later, 3 days later, I got a strange feeling that they were changing their mind. I learned from discussions with people in NACODS that they were about to change their mind. I tried desperately to persuade them to stand by the agreement that they reached with us, but they decided that they would settle separately what was called a sort of review procedure with the coal board. Get this, for historians and experts in autobiographies and biographies. On that moment, the TUC leadership urged NACODS to go on strike. In spite of the NUM calling on them to respect the vote, a ballot vote, they've been saying, we want a ballot. Well, they got one, 82%. So why did they change their mind without consulting the members? It was complete sabotage, because we know now that a settlement of that kind would have been clear. There would have been no arguments, we would have won the strike. There's been a lot said in the 40th year of this miners' strike. All I can say is that when we met on the 28th of February 1985, we had a problem, because 2 weeks before we had a conference, and that conference in February agreed that we would continue our strike. On the 28th of February, 1 week later, 5 NUM areas suddenly wrote in and asked for a recall conference and agreed, they said, return to work without a settlement. That conference took place on the 3rd of March 1985. The National Executive position was clear. We were in favour of continuing the strike as instructed by conference. The resolution to call off the strike in the subsequent debate, it was proposed by South Wales area, and it was seconded by the Durham area. That's a fact, and it was carried by 98 votes to 91, as close as that. The 3 national officials, Mick McGackie, Peter Heathfield and myself, argued and voted for a continuation of that strike, because we knew we could have won on the basis of the information that we had in our possession. The miners' strike of 1984-85 remains not only an inspiration for workers, but a reminder to today's trade union leaders of their responsibility to their members, the need to come together in direct action to challenge government policy and employers against all forms of injustice, inequality and exploitation. I always remember two of my heroes, Big Jim Larkin, who fought for secondary action, and of course legendary James Connolly, who fought for every fort. It's a privilege to be here today to pay tribute to all of you who took part in that historic strike. All of the people who supported it, who are here today. You have, as Larkin said, you not only did something marvellous on that occasion, but you marched into history. You entered the pantheon of working class heroes and heroines. We were supported from all over the country, from lesbians and gays to teachers' unions, to other organisations, the fire brigade, who didn't want in any way to do anything that would harm the miners in that dispute. They supported us. They were absolutely magnificent. So were the rail workers. And it was only elements within the TUC who didn't want to go to the end. But I am convinced and will remain convinced to the whole of my days. I'm 86 years of age, but I'm still campaigning for everything that I stood for and everything I said. I'm a socialist, I'm a Marxist, and to the day I die, I will always stand by what I've said, what I've done, and will continue to do it. I salute you, you are heroes.
Thank you, Arthur, for the fantastic speech. Thank you for your leadership throughout that struggle and leadership of the labour movement since then. Your name will be remembered alongside the names of Cook, Larkin and Connolly. Scargill, the name will live on in the same way. So Arthur, it's been a privilege to hear you today. Thank you so much for that fantastic speech.
You opened my eyes today.
Thank you.
Yes, I didn't know much about all this.
Well, I don't know how popular it is, but
it's called Drink Your Own Mud Downstream.
Well, I come from Australia. I come from a long way away.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about all this coal being imported back in again. It's ridiculous.
I wish we were as strong as the Australian miners.
Well, they are strong.
I had some good times as Australian miners in Bulgaria, in Russia.
Yes, yeah. And there's a Newcastle in Australia as well.
Yeah. The men were deported. The men that were deported to Wales went to Newcastle.
They went to Newcastle,
They worked in the pits in Australia.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Got a book coming out about it shortly.
Oh, so they survived.
They survived and prospered.
But you never heard from them again?
Yes. We came across an article written in the Evening Chronicle, Newcastle Evening Chronicle, from 10 years after. So in 1860, and one of them writes his story, his story.
Right.
And it's in dialect.
Wow. I'm glad to hear they survived.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And shake your chains to earth like the dew that in your sleep have fallen on you. Ye are many and they are still so